Hi, everyone. Good evening. I am so pleased to be here tonight with you and my friends from every library, the only National Political Action Committee for libraries. My name is Gigi Howard. I'm a librarian, and I'm also the host of Drinks in the Library, where every episode I interview a guest about their favorite book and we pair it with a drink. Now, this is National Library Week 2024, and National Library Week is when we celebrate all things library, the ways in which we show up for our communities, supporting our users in literacy, reading, intellectual freedom, the freedom to learn. And unfortunately, in the current political environment, librarians and libraries have seen tremendous spikes in book bans and censorship around the country, which we know is ultimately attack on our freedoms and our freedom to read. And now it's more important that we come together, our authors, our readers, our librarians, and library supporters to stand together against book bans and censorship. So I could not be more pleased to be here tonight with our panel to celebrate and to learn and to hear all about their latest novels. And so I am joined by Dina Santorelli. Welcome, Dina.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. Dina is an award-winning best-selling author of thriller and suspense novels. Her latest thriller, The Reformed Man, was a finalist in the 2023 New York Author Project and the 2023 American Writing Awards. Dina also lectures at Hofstra University's Continuing Education Department. She is an Indie Author Project Ambassador for the Library Journal. Also with us tonight is Michael La Ronn. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Hi. Michael is the author of over 30 science fiction and fantasy novels, including the Android X, Eaton, and the Good Necromancer series. To date, he has published over 1.5 million words of fiction and nonfiction. In 2012, a life-threatening illness made him realize that life is too short, and since then he's devoted his life to writing, making up whatever story makes him fall out of his chair laughing the hardest. Also, he's a total Final Fantasy geek. I also want to point out that both of you are independent authors, and you're also ambassadors for the Alliance of Independent Authors, or also known as ALLY. And Michael, you are also their outreach manager. And I am just so excited to hearing more about your experience with ALLY and as independent authors. And so, yeah, that's going to be a really cool thing to bring together. So let me turn to you, Dina, about your latest book, The Reformed Man.
Yes.
So here's a quote from Midwest Book Review.
Oh, boy.
The Reformed Man represents the dystopian sci-fi time travel story at its best. Dina Santorelli crafts a thought-provoking, riveting story of a brother changed by his experiences in time. The Reformed Man poses intriguing questions about the moral and ethical behaviors which will attract sci-fi enthusiasts of time travel stories and altered sense of value. So I have the Reformed Man right here. Very cool. So when you were getting ready to write this book, it just came out last year, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, what was your motivation in putting this sci-fi thriller together?
Well, it's funny. I had a dream a few years back about two men running toward the future. That's really all I can remember about that dream, but it was extremely vivid. And I had a very visceral reaction to it. And I remember waking up and telling my son, I have to write this book, which turned out to be easier said than done. Most of my thrillers take about a year and a half to write, and this one took a good 3 years. Part of the reason it took so long is that The Reformed Man is a much longer book than my other thrillers. It's over 500 pages in length. And it has very large themes. It's sort of what I call a save the world thriller. where my characters are running through time travel portals and running from one side of the world to the other. And I also happened to be writing this book during the COVID-19 pandemic, which it turns out tremendously impacted the telling of this story, from the political insurrection to the widespread fear and uncertainty to social justice causes. Had the pandemic not happened, I think The Reformed Man would have probably looked very different.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot. I mean, there was just a pandemic in the story as well. I mean, there's so many parallels to things that we're seeing right now. And so, without summarizing too much, and obviously no spoilers, what would you say The Reformed Man is about?
Um, I would say it's definitely a thriller. It's firmly stamped in the thriller genre with some sci-fi and dystopian elements. I would say it's the story of corruption, greed, power, but also a story of survival and hope. Without giving too much away, the book opens as a man named Benedict is contemplating suicide, and he's ready to end his unhappy life when the unthinkable happens. A cosmic disaster suddenly pitches Earth into a violent upheaval. There's flooding, there's earthquakes, and Benedict is about to die, not the way he had been planning, when a portal appears and he steps into it, and he escapes death by stepping into the future. He ends up seeing what becomes of Earth and humankind thousands of years later, and decides to return to the present and begin what he calls his quest to save the world. Because at this point, Earth has an expiration date, and he's figured out a way to funnel tens of thousands, possibly millions of people into the future, and he becomes a hero. At the same time, Grady Smith is preparing his brother to join Benedict's cause. And Grady's brother is set to travel to the future, but something happens that puts Grady and his brother on the wrong side of the law and sends them hurtling into the future. And it's only once they get there that they realize that the future is not quite what Benedict has described or promised. And
Uh-huh.
take it from there.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely got with Benedict. I got like some Elon Musk vibes with him,
I've
sort
heard
of.
that. Yes, I've heard that before.
I mean, it was very well done, so I definitely enjoyed that. So, when you were writing it and the structure of the novel, why did you decide to structure the novel in the way that you did?
That's a good question. I really had, after I had this dream, I really had no idea how to go about putting this novel together. Like I said, it was very big. And so I decided to let the time travel portal guide me. So I decided to divide the novel into three parts,
Mhm,
depending upon when Grady and his brother end up traveling to the future and then back again. So the time travel really is the demarcation point, I think, for the three parts.
mhm,
But it took a long time to put together. As I mentioned, the pandemic was going on, and it was a much larger scope than I was accustomed to writing. And it really took time to figure out what kind of world I wanted this to be.
mhm,
So I really I'm what they call a pantser, or they also call it being a discovery writer, where I don't really write with any sense of outline or plot,
mhm.
really. I sort of just sit down and write by the seat of my pants. And that's how I started writing The Reformed Man. And I would say I just wrote and wrote until I found the story beginning to take form.
Very cool. Um, I did want to take some time just to ask you about your experiences being an independent author, the joys, the challenges. What goes into that side of the writing journey for you?
I have to say, I am a very proud indie author. I've been an indie author since 2012. I can't
Mhm.
believe it's been that long, about 12 years.
Wow.
And I originally had an agent for my first novel. And we were pitching it to various publishers. And of course, getting rejections, which is not uncommon. But at the same time, I was also blogging, and I was watching the industry closely. And around this time, ebooks were taking off and self-publishing had
Mhm.
taken off. And I had decided to part ways with my agent and sort of take a chance and try and take control of my author career on my own. And
Mhm.
that meant really taking the creative reins, and deciding, what my book would look like, from book cover to size to price, how it would be distributed. These were all decisions that I could do myself.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest, since that decision in 2012, I've never looked back, and I've seen the indie author population just grow tremendously, and also the industry change so much in the last 12 years. I mean, back when I first self-published my first novel, Baby Grand, there weren't a lot of author services available to me to create my books on my own. And now, like, a whole service industry has grown to support the indie author community. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, like, you are also an editor as well, correct?
Yes,
So that's
yes.
another side of it, right?
Yeah, so which is kind of handy, when you decide to
Mhm.
become an author. But even so, although I do edit my own books, I also send them out to a copy editor,
Okay.
to catch those nagging typos and spelling errors.
Yeah. Well, I thank you. I am very interested in the indie author scene, so I really appreciate, kind of giving some insight to that.
Sure.
And then coming back to The Reformed Man, so see that cover that you picked out, that you decided on.
Yay!
Yay! What do you hope your readers take away from this story?
Well, it's interesting. I said this novel is about corruption and power and greed, but it really is also about hope. And I think that's the first thing I hope readers take away from it, that no matter how bleak things look, or no matter what happens to us, we should always remain hopeful. As I tell my kids, there's almost always an answer if we go looking for it. The other thing I wanted readers to take away from The Reformed Man is the idea that one person, one individual can make a difference, can impact the
Mhm.
world, in bad ways, yes, but also for good. And the idea that we as individuals have power, our ideas, our uniqueness, and we can't give that power away or let others take that power from us. We have to use that power, whether that means to vote in an election, or maybe that means to skip what they're saying on social media and do instead what's in our heart. We need to trust ourselves. So I hope readers come away from The Reformed Man obviously entertained, but also with a sense of hope and power.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I loved it. And so now we're going to turn it over to Michael and give him some chance to talk about his latest book. And so this is from the Good Necromancer series. It's book 6, and it has the very catchy title, Any Lich Way, from our protagonist. So um, this whole series is described as Harry Dresden meets Alex Cross in this electrifying urban fantasy series, and it will keep you spellbound. So, Michael, going back to the same question about your motivation when you started writing this story, I don't know if it's the whole series. I mean, what was your motivation behind this particular book?
Sure. So I like to write stories that are in a way wish fulfillment. I always like to write protagonists that are underdogs and who
Mhm.
would you would normally wouldn't root for, right?
Mhm.
And so this series for me, it's about a necromancer who uses his powers for good. And necromancers are people that have the ability to control the dead. They're typically associated with evil. That, typically if I told you a character was a necromancer, you would say that's an evil character. Well,
Mhm.
I thought, why not turn that trope on its head? What if there was a person who was a necromancer who had the ability to talk to the dead and control the dead, and he was a good guy? And what would that look like? And how would he use his powers? And how would he how would he relate to the world?
Yeah.
And that's where it comes from. And the main character, he fights all the things that go bump in the night in the city of St. Louis, which is where I grew up. And there's lots of occult, there's lots of paranormal, lots of anything you could think of in terms of paranormal creatures. He's usually battling against it, using his powers and his very unique skill set. And I'm just drawn to those types of characters that are a little different, a little unique, and have that underdog quality to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So, going particular to this one, what is, without summarizing it, like I said, no spoilers, what is this book about?
Yeah, I'll talk about the series in general because it's 6 books deep, so
Yeah.
I can't talk about book 6 without spoiling it. But
Hmm.
it's about a necromancer who uses his powers for good. Lester Broussard used to be the most powerful necromancer in the city of St. Louis. Anytime you deal with the dark art, bad things happen. And so he invited demons and black magic and the occult into his life. And he lost his wife and lost his son as a result. And that drove him into a depression for 7 years. And turns out that the demon that caused all that trouble is back and wants to finish what he started with Lester. And he's decided that he's not going to go quiet into that good night or go gentle into that good night, so to speak. He's going to take his powers, take them back, and use them for good, which is to vanquish this demon and protect the city from all the things that try to rip you apart when you're walking down an alley in the middle of the night. And so the
Yeah.
series is really more of a redemption story of him making atonement for the mistakes that he made and learning how to live again.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's like a little bit, as it's like you said, it's kind of dark and deep and everything, but there is a levity to his viewpoint, I think, sometimes, just to the way that he sees the world. And, the whole story starts off, he just wants to take a nap.
Yeah, he wants to take a nap, and I like to write characters that are characters that you'd like to have a beer with.
Hmm.
And yes, he's a necromancer, and that there's that heaviness associated with it. But really, the story is quite light, and it's humorous, and it's entertaining, and that's the hallmark of my style.
Okay, very cool. And so, talk about the structure of the book. Why did you decide to structure the novel the way that you did?
Yeah, well, Dina and I are kindred spirits because I also am a pantser. So I have no idea what I'm going to start writing when I sit down. The only thing I know is a hero in a setting with a problem, which in this case is the character wants to take a nap. And I let my fingers guide me throughout the rest of the story. And what I find is that I end up coming up with really interesting concepts and interesting ways to structure stories. The there are certain story structures that are kind of tales as old as time, right? You've got
Okay.
your beginning, your middle, your end, you've got your
Hmm.
first act, your second act, your third act. And I find that when I just listen to my intuition, that the story tends to hit all of those key points. And I've always been a big believer that if I don't know what's going to happen in the story, then the readers aren't going to know what's going to happen either. And that makes for a more fun experience for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, going to your experience being an independent author, um, can you? I know you do a lot, like with Ally, and then also with helping other independent authors, grow and learn. So, what has been the takeaways from your journey being an independent author?
Sure, I am an independent author, and I love it. I have been doing this for as long as Dina has, which is
Hmm.
kind of crazy to believe that it's been about 12 years.
Oh,
I am the outreach manager for Ally, as you mentioned, and we pronounce it Ally because we believe that every self-published author needs an ally.
yeah.
That's the easiest way to remember it. And we're a nonprofit organization by independent authors for
Hmm.
independent authors. So we use the term self-publishing, but at the end of the day, authors can't really do it by themselves. They have to hire
Hmm.
editors and cover designers, and it really does take a team effort to be able to create a book and get it out into the world. And Ally does such an amazing job of providing tons of resources to help authors make those informed decisions. So, as Dina mentioned, finding that editor, finding that cover designer, we've got databases where we vet different service providers to help authors stay away from the bad guys and send them to the service providers that are doing a really good job. And we have a blog. We've got a podcast network. We have all sorts of resources and campaigns that are designed to help authors put their best foot forward and get their stories out into the world, because we believe that every story should be told.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to learn more about this. And I mean, I was to prepare for this, I was listening to stuff that both you and Dina have done, and I found a podcast where you were talking about the insurance, liability insurance for authors and explaining to people. I mean, that's something I would didn't even know existed. I thought, how cool is it that somebody's putting this out there for free? So,
Yeah, there's lots of information. That's it's funny, Gigi, you're after my heart because that's one of my favorite topics. It's also probably the most boring topic, but it's funny because there's so many facets to being
hmm
an independent author, because if you have a traditional publisher, they usually will take care of a lot of things for you.
right.
You don't necessarily have to worry about the little details, right? But as an
Right.
independent author, everything is your responsibility. You're putting
hmm
your name on a book, but you're putting your name on the book. Everything that happens is your responsibility. And there are a lot of authors that find that that is terrifying. And there are a lot of authors like me and Dina who find that empowering. It's
Yeah.
it's it's amazing. Like, yes, I have to make all those decisions, but wait a minute, I get to make all those decisions, and any success I have is 100% my own. And that's a really enlightening and empowering life to live, when you consider that there are so many independent authors every year who are now making a living from
Yeah.
their work. And it's really an amazing thing.
Yeah, it absolutely, it really is. Well, thank you. And so to come back just one last time, so what do you hope that readers take away from the book, from the Good Necromancer series in general? Any conversations you want to spark or perspectives you want to challenge?
I am purely an entertainer when it comes to my novels. I think that people have enough problems that they have to deal with, a boss who's a jerk at work, or you got stuck in traffic for an hour on your way home, or you got to deal with chores, or all sorts of things and all sorts of problems that people have. And being able to escape into a novel and forget about the world for a little bit, to me, that is the most important thing and the best part about being an author for me. And so if I can entertain somebody for an hour or a couple of hours and just make them forget about the stresses of the world, then I've done my job.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Love hearing about everything, all the books. And now let's talk a little bit with everyone about it's National Library Week. And so my first question is for both of you. What role do libraries play in your writing life? So, Dina, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm very lucky here on Long Island, New York, to have an active and vibrant library. If you look at the monthly newsletter, you'll see all kinds of events for adults and children about books and reading, and beyond. We have book clubs, writing clubs, yoga, dance parties, Zumba, Pilates. Our library is a place for community and activity, and I'm thrilled to say it's thriving. As an author, I use it obviously as a place for research, but I also use it as a quiet place to write when it's just a little crazy at home, or my Shih Tzu decides to spend the day barking at squirrels, which she does often.
Mhm.
But it's a tremendous place, and as an indie author, if we're talking about being an indie author, my local library and other libraries on Long Island have been vital to my business simply by carrying my books, whether it's an ebook or an audiobook or a hardback. And libraries are another place for readers to discover new authors, and they've been crucial to helping me build my author business.
Wonderful. Michael, how about you? And I have to say, there is a section in the book where talking about Michael in the St. Louis Central Library. You did a really good
Yes.
job describing that. So so what role do libraries play in your life?
Yeah, well, shout out to the St. Louis Central Library, and also shout out to the Urbandale Library and the Des Moines Public Library where I live, because they've been critical in the formation of my own, success and understanding as a writer. I'll give you a personal story. Everything Dina said is spot on in terms of libraries being where readers go to reach readers. I actually have a personal story that doesn't even involve me. that illustrates like the importance of how important libraries are to me. So my dad just retired. He retired a few years ago, and he's worked really hard his entire life. And now that he has tons of time to, you know, be around the house, he goes to the library. Like he goes to the library probably 2 or 3 times a week. And every time I come home, I see a stack of hardcover books on the shelf. And I used to never see him read when I was a kid. And the libraries have become like this really amazing part of his life now. And he's discovering stories, and we can connect now over books where we were never able to do that. And I just think that that's just an amazing thing, and it just shows you like the power that libraries have in the community. In addition to just being a place where people find books, I also think it's a place where people can find community. And I just have been able to witness that in my own life and be able to see that transformation in my dad, and it's just been a really cool thing. So that for me, that's my personal story about how libraries are impactful.
I love to hear that. And, as a librarian, I'm a public librarian, and we do see people go through their eras of life. And maybe someone who was working for so long and they weren't able to read, they just didn't have the time, or they're raising children, and then they're back, and it's
Yeah.
really, it's a beautiful process to be there for the community in that way. So I love hearing that. Um, let's see. Another question I have is, what are your experiences or concerns about censorship and the culture of reading right now? So, Dina, do you want to get us started?
Sure. As with the library question, I feel like I'm very lucky again to live on Long Island, New York. Here in New York, for the most part, public libraries and also school libraries remain vibrant, inclusive spaces for people and students. There has been only one recent incident, to my knowledge, where a library board voted to ban certain books. But that decision was quickly condemned by the New York Library Association, by local politicians, by the governor of New York, and also by a best-selling author who used to work at that library, which is interesting. I think that situation was the exception rather than the rule. But I do want to say my personal worry when it comes to censorship as both a reader and an author has more to do with self-censorship. Just as I believe we should have access to all kinds of books and should be able to read whatever we like, I also believe that authors should be able to write whatever they like. I believe so very strongly in that imagination should be a safe place, and that imagination should be fostered and encouraged and vibrant. And in the last few years, a lot of authors have expressed, either to me or to others, that they can sometimes feel pressured not to write about certain topics or not to write certain scenes or types of characters in their novels, especially in the age of social media. They might fear being bullied or judged or maligned or canceled on a grand scale, so they shy away from these stories that they want to tell. And to me, this is just as bad, if not worse, than banning books. Just as readers need safe spaces to read, I feel like authors need safe spaces to write. And I can't help but think what a shame it would be for all authors to not be able to tell the stories they want to tell, the stories that are in their hearts, because we all benefit when there's a diversity of voices out there and a diversity of points of view. And I feel like that applies to books that haven't been written as much as it applies to books that already have.
Well, thank you. And Michael, coming to you, concerns about censorship and the culture of reading right now.
Yeah, I think that accessibility is really important, and I think you have to take it from the creation of a book all the way down to the picking up of a book. I believe that anyone who wants to be able to tell a story should be able to tell their story, and no one should be able to not publish a book because of no access to funds or no access to be able to get the proper tools to be able to do that. And I also believe that readers have a choice in what they read. And never before in the age of the digital era have there been more books, more avenues and opportunities for people to find the things that resonate most with them. And I think that that's a good thing, even though there are certainly books out there that the three of us would never pick up off a shelf or would disagree with in terms of what the content of that book is. I still think that books are a force for conversation. And rather than shutting down the conversation, to me, I think it's far better to let the books be, and let's have conversations as a community about the impact of those books rather than try to shut them down and shut down voices. And, as I said, there's never been a better time. There are a lot of authors who historically have not been able to share their stories for all sorts of different reasons. And to shut those books down, I think is harmful to our society.
Yeah. Well, in libraries, we often talk about the freedom to read. Maybe we should add on that also the freedom to write.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, this has been wonderful. I do want to ask, because we are at the 30-minute mark, what are you, I know, it went by so fast. What are you working on now, and where can people meet you next? So Dina, where can people find you?
Well, I'm working on a psychological thriller called My Best Friend's Wife, which is a much shorter book than The Reformed Man, and hopefully will be out soon. It's about three close friends and what happens to them when one of them decides to get married. As for signings or upcoming events, I have nothing scheduled at the moment, but I can see my website below my headshot here, and you can visit my website and sign up for my newsletter, and you'll be the first to hear about any upcoming events I have.
Love it. Thank you. Michael, what about you?
I'm working on book 7 of my Good Necromancer series. It's tentatively called Grave Angel, and I'm looking forward to that. But you can engage with me if you dare at michaellaronn.com. And if anything I said around Ally, the Alliance of Independent Authors, resonated with you, for any budding independent authors out there who might be listening, I really invite you to engage with us at selfpublishingadvice.org. We've got lots of free information and things that you can take advantage of today to help you in your author career.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. I really enjoyed talking with you and learning about your work. Also, please check out my show, Drinks in the Library. It drops every week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube Podcasts. Thank you. And lastly, every library, PEN America, and We Believe are spreading the love to libraries through a joint love letter to libraries this week. As we mark National Library Week, please add your name to the list of people who are honoring libraries' essential role in fostering community engagement and learning. Visit everylibrary.com and scroll down for the link. All right, y'all. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.